Here is your Riesling. Whoop. Cheers, everybody.
Yeah.
Welcome, happy hour.
And where are we?
Yes, perfect. Yes.
It's empty. It's at proof. It's empty.
Sally's talking early, and she's on the West Coast.
You might slur my words, won't you?
Oh, fantastic! So, what I do before we go off and detour into our vineyard tour, I do want to give Sally a proper introduction. We were introduced by a mutual chef friend, and she's obviously from Australia with the accent. Moved here in 2001, but has written a bunch, like 18 different cookbooks and publications. She's been a guest lecturer. She does a lot of writing, all sorts of things, and represents a selection of food companies from around Australia. And so we were talking recently about where kingfish comes from and how they fish for kingfish. And I'm like, you guys are going to love this because it's interesting where the fish come from and where they live. And it's just like anything. The more you start learning about something, the more there is to learn about it. So,
and Sally does really simple recipes. I don't know how many of you made this really, really simple recipe.
Yeah.
Whoops, here it is. But
I'm lazy Australian.
it is delicious, but plan ahead.
yeah, we had to substitute because toothfish is hard to find in sunny side.
You know, it's not. It's just that the people that sell it aren't aware of the fact they're selling it. So I sort of make it a mission to go around. I mean, particularly Whole Foods and where else? I've been to a few other, like the PCC markets and a few of the others. I've been to them and I see sometimes they write Chilean sea bass and they don't write where it's from. And I said, where is that from? And so they have a look at it and they say, oh, it's from Australia. And I say, can you go out and have a look on the label? And I said, and see if it's called Glacier 51. And often it is, and they just don't know it. So, chances are if you've lately eaten, portions or you've seen the large fillets chopped up of the Chilean sea bass or toothfish, it has actually been the Glacier 51. And then it's really nice to know that you have, because it's the only fishery actually in the world to be carbon neutral. They basically, ships go down to the Antarctic and they're, let me find one of the photos. It makes your America's greatest catch look like Swan Lake. It's really spectacular what they have to go through. Okay, am I revealing photos? Oh, here we go.
No, I think I have to let you. But
come up? No?
should, before I let you show pictures though, I'm going to let Dad do his vineyard tour or his vineyard update because he's got to go up and change water in not too long. So we're going to let Dad give his update. And one of the things that I think is interesting about the wine this week with the 19 Riesling, because in a couple weeks when Megan is speaking, Riesling's her favorite. So we're going to do the 18. So we'll have an interesting vintage comparison. But 19 was a pretty normal heat units throughout the course of the growing season. We had that really late spring. It was a lot of snow, so there was a lot of water in the soil profile going into the season compared to normal for us. And this year has been the winter was much drier and we are not quite as warm. It's been such a cool spring that this is really the first time that we're talking about it being hot. And so, Adrish, get out of Australia, come back to and so so it's been every vintage is unique and different and interesting, and it always keeps us on our toes. And I was asked this morning what time, when we think harvest is going to be for harvest planning, and I said, well, I think it'll be fairly normal, but you never really know. It's always the adventure of agriculture. So Dad was up in the vineyard this morning and took the pictures. We'll start in the Syrah. Oh, and I have to unmute Dad. Hold on. Oh, where are you, Dad? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So these are the Syrah shoots that we've been following. Some of the light makes it look yellower, but part of that is because of the time in the morning. It was beautiful morning light. What you can see are the clusters are pretty well developed now. The berry size is smaller than average, which is something that we have targeted, knowing that we had a dry spring, and we have been meager with the water. But at the same time, if you look at the upper parts of the shoots off to the right, you'll see that they have responded to the additional water that we, once we identified these vines were stressed, we got them in that specific location, additional water, by modifying the drip system, and they're responding, so everything's good there. Then in the Cabernet,
Here we go.
again, the same shoots on the right. Those shoots that we started following didn't have much fruit, and so we added the clusters to the left. You'll note that the clusters in the Cabernet are not as elongated. The size of the berries is rounder. The berry size is definitely smaller. That's something that by our water management we wanted, so that we intensify the wines. And so we're looking at a very promising type of vintage. The other thing you'll notice is that the shoots are brown, and they're starting the, that's called lignification. It's a maturation process. So instead of the vines focusing on growth, they're maturing and starting to harden off for the winter. So these are changes. And then Adrish had asked me to explain technical things. And so the marker that Carrie pointed out last week that we now find throughout the vineyard is that the seed coat is hardened. And so what you see is I've cut the berry open and the seeds are in there. And then you put them in your mouth and you crunch them. And if they crunch instead of just mush, then you know that the seed coats are hardened. Significance of this is that the berry size is determined by that transition in the seed coat. And so we know we have small berries. We now can be a little more generous with the irrigation profile. So hopefully that answers your question, Adrish, about seed coat hardening.
Yeah, it also means that the first part of the season that we've been talking about, our berries are getting bigger every week, and now we're entering into lag phase, and it'll stay in this spot for about 2 weeks, and then we get into veraison, and soon that's super. The grape physiology at that point, I think, is super cool, and that's when we start getting closer and closer to harvest. So this is.
But the fact that we do have seed coat hardening is we've been looking at mile markers that we've passed. When you have seed coat hardening, you've actually crossed a bridge over a river instead of just another mile marker. So now we are pointing, instead of developing everything, now we're pointing towards the steps to harvest, and it's cool.
Yippers. So veraison will be in about 2 weeks, Adrish, so early August, which is pretty much on track for normal. So even though it's been a cooler spring, everything's happening about when it should, about when is normal. And so it's shaping up to be a fairly classic Washington vintage. I think last time I looked at historical markers, this trends to, like I think I said last week, this is trending to 2012, which was a beautiful year and pretty classic Washington. This is the kind of vintage that we would like to have every year. So. And
relative to a question that was posed last week, do we think there will be a red label? There's a very good possibility. This will be the first time in several years that we are licking our chops about having a red label come from that specific site in the vineyard that does it so well.
So, Cody, do you have any vineyard comments? How your grapes looking?
Well, things are moving along. You know, I've heard we might be a little early. Hugh might have some insight into that. Earlier in the season, I heard Colin Morrell at Lonesome Spring was thinking we were about a week ahead of normal. How do you feel about that, Hugh? Or do you think we're kind of more right on a normal pick date?
Well, we've had cooler weather, but we've had these heat spikes such as the one we're in right now. We had 2 days of 100 degrees Monday, Tuesday. And so that tends rather to slow the vines down once you get over 95. So I think it could be that we're a little bit early, but we're looking to start sampling in early August. And so that'll give us some hard data to say how things are going. But the fact that we've turned a corner with seed coat hardening in all of our varietals at the Brule, like I said, we've crossed the river. We are headed towards harvest.
Yeah, what I've seen looking around is on average, I'm seeing some smaller canopies and a little lower yields perhaps. And I think in some cases that's due to the drier spring and some growers not appreciating how dry things were. And I know, but the quality looks fantastic. So I'm with you there, Carrie.
Well, good. Yeah, I think it's going to be a great vintage. So, any other vineyard questions, or should we? All right, I'm going to mute. You're muted. You're done. So then, when we grow all these delicious grapes and make all this delicious wine, then we need the delicious food to pair it with. And now, Sally, you can share your pictures. So you are
In control.
in control. And that picture I sent out in the newsletter, by the way, I did not take that. I did not plate that food. We did not take that. That was all Sally. So
Let me see. Oh gosh, I wish I was more versed with this. So I did save it on the desktop, but you're on the desktop. What are you doing on my desktop, Gary?
I don't know.
Okay, so if I open images here, okay.
Here we go.
Did that come up?
Yes, it did.
Oh, wacko. So this is what I was saying about our fishermen making yours look like Swan Lake. So basically what happens with this Glacier 51 toothfish that you'll find in Whole Foods and markets around here is that the ships go down to the Antarctic. They moor under Heard Island, which is an Australian-owned territory in the Antarctic, and they stay down there for 2 months. And they catch the fish about 1 mile down. There are MSC and government officials, as well as World Wildlife Fund officials on board that are continually monitoring the stock levels by laser beam to make sure that the levels are maintained and it stays sustainable. And then they stay down there, and what happens is as soon as they catch the fish, they fillet it and snap freeze it, and they have these 4-ton freezers on each ship, so it's frozen straight away. So a lot of people will say, you know, the best way to eat fish is fresh, but often fresh is a week old because it's taken that long. Even local fish here, it's sometimes gone through that many hands and taken that long to get to you that by the time you're buying it, it's been sitting around for, you know, up to, you know, probably the least is 3 days up to a week. Whereas when you get frozen fish and you know it's been frozen on the boat and not thawed out and then refrozen, and then the retailer freezes it before they're selling it, that's probably the freshest way you're ever going to eat fish, which is why a lot of sashimi restaurants and people that serve fish raw prefer that kind of, I mean, aside from the bugs in the salmon, that's how they prefer to serve it. So that's one of the fish. And speaking of wine and fish and the correlation, one of the wonderful things about this toothfish is that it's got a beautiful butteriness. If you've had Chilean sea bass before, it's even got a quite an oily, strong flavour. But because this one is so deep in such, chilly waters, it's got, icebergs everywhere, and it's also a very strong current. The flesh is more dense and more buttery, so it lends itself. So it lends itself to more cooking methods, and it's wonderful to pair with both red and white wine. So, it depends on the application. The dish that I chose to go with the Riesling, I did simply to illustrate how marvellous I thought the Riesling would be with Asian flavours. So it's so hence the satay sauce. But this Riesling would be ideal with a stir fry, with sashimi with wasabi, that kind of thing, or with a curry, any of those kind of dishes. But I just thought it would be great for the toothfish because of the butteriness of it and the brightness of the Riesling cutting through it. So that's a bit more for you on that one. Let me just scroll through. Okay, the scroll doesn't work. Okay. So that was that dish, and then the other dish I did with the rosé was I just really wanted to play on the fact that the rosé to me had such beautiful French qualities about it from the south of France, which I think is just wonderful, because it's how I really, because it makes it so food friendly. So I tried to pick a typical dish from Provence to pair with it. So with that one, I used the kingfish. So let me get some photos up to show you. This is the actual fish. Did that show up? No?
Yes.
Yes, now? Okay, so that's it's a yellowtail kingfish, so you can see it's got the yellow tail and beautiful white flesh. This one is actually farmed down in the Spencer Gulf no, you are sharing, okay, good. So the Spencer Gulf, which is south of Australia, and again, it's, is that coming up, that image? Good. So this is in waters just south of, those who have been to Kangaroo Island have probably gone through Spencer Gulf. And it's, again, very cold waters that are fed by the Antarctic current. So it's really fast-flowing waters and really cold. So, again, it's in the same family as hamachi, and you might have seen yellowtail or hiramasa from Baja, or kampachi. It's in that same family, so you'll often see it on sushi and sashimi menus. But this one, because unlike the others, it's from such chilly waters and it's a real fighting flesh, you'll find it holds up a lot better in cooking. You can grill it, you can poach it, but it's also beautiful crudo. That's the dish that we had at the Canyon River Grill, Kerry. There was that beautiful crudo that Kevin did with it. So it's a really delicious dish. Oh,
Can you make that picture a little bigger? So that
well, the screen went bigger, but the picture didn't. That's curious. I wonder why that is.
What happens if you hit the plus sign?
yeah, what happens if you hit the zoom?
That thing. There you go.
There we go.
Now it's full of all these pixels.
Okay.
Get the idea.
Yeah, you see it's interesting how they keep them in pens.
Yeah, they well, that's how they farm them, and that's how they protect the environment. I mean, this species is actually native to that area, so even though it's got relatives all around the world, it is a species and a particular strain that is native to this area. But all the same, they need to farm them to keep the supply sustainable. And also it allows them that when they harvest them, they put these huge nets in and bring out what they need each day. And I don't know if any of you heard about how you kill a fish the most humane way and the best way for the quality of the flesh, but it's an ikijama, which is basically a needle in through the throat. So they've got this amazing system where they bring the fish in, and if you want to jot down or look up on the website, you go to cleanseas.com.au and you can see videos and footage of how they do it. But it means that it bleeds the fish and kills it instantly, and then it's taken straight on land and again frozen until it gets to you. Or a lot of whole fresh fish do come over to the States, but not right now because Qantas isn't flying to America. So basically it comes over, you know, passengers upstairs, fish downstairs, hitching a ride. Otherwise, the frozen sides are really beautiful. This one, I don't know retailers that carry it, but you can buy it online, and it's a really lovely fish. Let me just show you a few more photos of it. Going back here. Sorry, my very, very slow way. So this is a grilled dish. Okay, who can throw in a wine pairing for this one? It's grilled and it's got a onion and hazelnut relish on top, sitting on wilted greens. What do you,
yeah, I'd go Chardonnay.
oh, yeah, buttery, nice, nice. You know, a point about the nuts is when you have a dish, and particularly a nice rich wine like a Chardonnay, and you feel the dish hasn't got enough complexity, throw in some nuts. They really do help. You know, you've heard about wine bridges. Nuts and cheese do add a wonderful wine bridge between food and wine that make it a lot more accessible, particularly if you're making food for red wine drinkers and it's a dish that's classically a white wine style dish. I mean, I don't like to believe you should have, you know, fish with white wine and meat with red wine, but nuts and cheese really do help make that bridge. So, sorry, I'll go to a few more photos here, see if we can challenge you to. Pens, just to show you the area of Australia that it's in. Okay, here we go, the zoom again. Yep. So, Kerry, where you were working would have been around here somewhere?
No, I was actually in Victoria. I worked
Victoria. So this is Victoria. This is New South Wales. You'll see Sydney here. The capital of Australia is actually in a little state all of its own there. This is Queensland, Northern Territory, West Australia, Margaret River, of course, down there. But this area here is the Gulf, the Spencer Gulf. And this is where your Kangaroo Islands down there. So this is all, the Antarctic's just down here below it. So that's where you'll find a lot of really beautiful fish coming from.
So, Sally, do most of the fish that would come, at least over here, do they come from that South Australian, the Bight? Or, I mean, I know there's a lot of fish around the reef.
Yep. There are not many of the reef fish come here. We get, you get quite a lot from the Gulf of Carpentaria, for example. One of the companies that, the company that does the toothfish I was talking about also do the beautiful, I don't know why these images are all so small, the beautiful Skull Island prawns that come basically frozen with their head on, and they come from the Gulf of Carpentaria, which is right up in the very north Australia. Again, it's a wild and sustainable and carbon neutral. The way they maintain their carbon neutral accreditation is they plant native trees, similar to what's happening in Yakima that you were showing me, Kerry and Kathy. And the native trees that they plant are particularly beneficial for the carbon balance, and they've been shown to measure any carbon that is used by the ships going out, by the ships coming to the US to bring the fish here, etc. So, I mean, they've spent a lot of money to be able to achieve that. But hopefully there'll be more fisheries that follow in line with that. So, but there, we have a lot of fish come from West Australia as well, particularly crustaceans, and from south of Victoria. You might have heard of our rock lobster, which is very prized here. A lot of our prawns are coming from the coast of New South Wales. So it's really, I mean, we're very fortunate to have a huge abundance of seafood like New Zealand does. Probably you might even get more seafood from New Zealand here in the US than you would from Australia, because you have the beautiful Ora King and Saiku salmon that you see quite commonly, as well as abalone and mussels. So New Zealand does a really good job, actually. They put us to shame a bit. I didn't say that, did I?
Where do the rock lobsters come from?
Sorry?
Where do the rock lobsters come from?
Most of them are coming from between South Australia and Victoria, but the majority are between Victoria and Tasmania. There's quite a lot of fish that comes over from Tasmania as well. They do their tuna. You might have seen ocean trout, which comes from there, which is quite similar to the ocean trout you'll see from Scotland. So again, these aren't fish that you'll really find in Whole Foods or Safeway. They're more the ones you'll find in, the fishmongers, the fish only stores, which, it's hard to find, but I think they're the best place to buy the fish from. But, and the other thing that you keep a lookout for, they're often quite hard to find, but anyone that's been to Australia hopefully will have tried them. Did you have any of the bugs, anyone that's been to Australia? And I don't mean the bitey, deadly bugs. I mean the Moreton Bay bugs or the Balmain bugs.
Well, we do have a question as to where the bugs come from. So, and I don't know where either of those places are. So can you pull your map up again and show us? But no, I don't think I ever ate bugs.
Well, basically, we get the map of Australia up again. The bugs come from all around, depending on what type they are. I mean, Balmain is actually a suburb of Sydney, but the Moreton Bay bugs, Moreton Bay is up in Queensland, so most of them come from up there, but they do come from all around, a lot of them in this area. And then Marron, which is like a prehistoric black one, but basically a bug is like a cross between a prawn and a lobster. So it's like a big crayfish. It's soft and succulent and really delicious. So it's like how, koalas, kangaroos and wombats, our seafood does tend to be quite unique and not found anywhere else in the world. I mean, barramundi is one that probably our most common one now that you see in the USA, because they're farming that out of Vietnam and Malaysia. So that is quite common. There's a few of these other images. So, okay, let's scroll down to a few of, I think, did I show you this one? This is actually showing the yellowtail, how they are in the farm. Now, it looks like the pen density, which I think is a really important issue that you need to look at when you're getting farmed fish, is that they're not crowded too much. And this photo makes it look like they're all jammed together, but they actually swim in schools. So they actually like being together. So you'll find that there's probably a quarter of that pen that the fish are in, and the rest of the pen is totally empty, and they're just swimming around in circles. But they just like being together for some reason. So I guess they're a social. Thank goodness they don't have COVID happening. Anyway, so
Adrish asked, how did you get into this business?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I was trained as sort of a chef. I was trained as a home economist, which is like a chef, but not a chef for restaurants, a chef more for the public and for manufacturers, catering, that kind of thing. But I didn't like that work so much, so I got more involved in nutrition and writing and consulting. And then when I moved to America, I just had a lot of companies that approached me and said, can you represent us in Australia? And so most of my work now has just involved sort of being a brand ambassador for Australian food and wine. But I still write cookbooks and do recipe creation and quite a few different things these days, because you need to stay on top of it as work goes up and down and the dollar goes up and down. So but I do a lot in food and wine pairing, which is why I was really delighted to do this. And a lot particularly in the seafood area with food and wine. But I was going to show you just so this is what the sorry, they're so small. This is what the kingfish looks like as a sashimi. So you've probably seen, this is probably the hamachi that you'll have seen, looks most similar to this. And again, it's one that your Riesling would be absolutely stunning with. If I was in Australia, I would say a dry Semillon. But again, because the fish has a beautiful butteriness, it'd be really nice with your rosé as well, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you have a favorite food and wine pairing?
Oh, wow. I really love oysters and sparkling wine. And I love salmon and Pinot Noir. Gosh, what else? Let me just pull up a photo and say I would love that with...
That is
Help me out here. What would we like this with?
that was good.
Yes.
It's actually spicy, so there's lots of chilies in it. It's the head-on Skull Island prawn. It's got grilled lemons, herbs. Anyone got any suggestions of what they would like with this dish?
We heard Carriage House. That was, and yeah, there's enough spice in there that it's Carriage House is, I don't think, what did we drink with it? We were drinking beer.
For this, and then we moved on to, we had a, what do we have?
We had the Oregon
Chardonnay, wasn't it?
Sauvignon Blanc.
Sauvignon Blanc, that's right. But that wasn't pair well with Sauvignon
No,
Blanc.
we went fishing in the canyon the other day and ended up needing a beer for rehydration. And when these prawns came out, I think we were still on beer, but the rosé
really well with this.
Rosé would go well too.
Grenache would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of salmon, that I wasn't just then, but before, as much as I love my Australian heritage and I think you can't beat Scottish salmon. The way they farm and their waters, and you can almost taste the community in it, because really when you think of salmon from Scotland, each little farm is supporting a village that has cared and fished and cared, and been part of that environment for hundreds of years. And you can tell it in the salmon. You can taste it when it's from Loch Dwart or from the Hebrides, and they're so careful. It's not just a job to them; it's a way of life. And I think there's so many different kinds too, and their ocean trout is really beautiful. But there's, I think sometimes, like the farmed Ora King from New Zealand, I find it very, very oily. It's very intensely farmed and fed, and some people love that. I mean, chef, it's like doing Wagyu beef, but it's all a personal preference. Actually, here's a challenge for you. This is a ceviche that you could do with the kingfish I mentioned, but I mean, it'd be beautiful now with the local halibut. And all it is you just marinate the fish for half an hour in some lemon and lime juice, and then add seasonal ingredients and chili if you want to spice it up. And a way to turn it into a Pacific style dish is to add a touch of coconut milk, which really makes it beautiful. But anyone got a wine for this one? I would personally do a beautiful Bordeaux blend with this. I need to have your wines in front of me so I can see. Actually, your Chardonnay would go nicely in this because it's so beautifully balanced.
I was thinking Riesling.
Sauvignon Blanc might be good
Sauvignon
too.
Blanc
But
would be
the
good.
coconut milk, Riesling, I think the Riesling, the coconut milk is a nice segue.
Yeah, Vino Verde would be a good one, Tony, with that bright acidity.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And the avocado as well would make that a nice pairing as well.
I agree, Scott. I like this game.
It's work, Scott. It's not a game. It's work. Somebody has to do it, though.
That's true. And Adrish has a very good point to pair with Tony. The Riesling goes with everything, including coffee, because that is how you breakfast wines of champions. Go with coffee.
Riesling and coffee. That's really funny you saying that, because I used to, when I worked for the Heart, I don't know whether it was the stress of the job, but when I worked with the Heart Foundation in Australia, every afternoon on the way home from work, I would have a cappuccino and a glass of Riesling.
Perfect. Love it.
Go figure. It was a South Australian Riesling, mind you. I didn't know about yours at the time. But
Well, now you do. Now you do. So,
no, I don't know if you can get it in Australia, but this is just another shot that gives you a look at what the toothfish. So each of these sides, to give you a concept of the size, that would be about 2 feet.
wow.
So they're quite large, and this is, you know, a picture of the waters that they're fished in. So as you can see, quite chilly, and as you saw in that photo, sometimes the waves are incredible, and I don't know how, there have been no deaths on their boats, and it's incredible because sometimes you'll just see a whole iceberg break off and smash over the deck, and how they've been able to survive it, I'll never know. But that's the label you look for. So, you know, if you see a local fishmonger and you want to know, you know, if it's this fishery, because you'll know the quality, and I think that's a really important thing when we're getting fish. I mean, it's like when you buy Alaskan salmon, and you know, you're so fortunate up here because you've got some of the best seafood in the world right at your doorstep. You know, the local halibut is just stunning, and you've got the spot prawns and the abalone and the gooey duck. Has anyone had gooey duck before? Yeah. It's quite unique, quite phallic looking, if you've seen it. In fact, there's a video that I should post the link to where Kevin actually is with Anthony Bourdain on a beach, pulling gooey duck out and then cooking them on the beach. It's quite fascinating. So yeah, so you've got some really amazing seafood up here. Go back to my
Question.
yes.
Kevin said, and I was wondering this as well when you showed the picture, is kingfish also called yellowtail here, or are those two different fish?
Yep. It's the same. It's a yellowtail kingfish. It's also called hiramasa. So it's part of the amberjack family. So there are fish is really confusing. There are so many different names for the same fish, and it can vary from country to country. So yeah, it can be difficult, but they are all part of the same family. And what sets them apart more so is what part of the world they're farmed, because really it's like wine and terroir. You know, a South Australian Riesling is very different from your Riesling, and you know, the soil and everything. Same with, you know, regions of the water, how warm the water is, how deep the fish is caught, how it's caught. And so, you know, it can be quite different. I mean, for example, I think in Florida, a lot of chefs tell me they're catching kingfish all the time, but it's, you know, it's nothing like our kingfish. So it's can be confusing. I just wanted to see, though, here's another dish that it's absolutely stunning and easy to prepare. Is that shown up?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you get a piece of salmon, a piece of kingfish, make sure it's preferably sashimi grade, but it doesn't have to be, but make sure it's fresh. And you make a mixture of, you put in the blender some peeled and chopped up beets with some salt and some sugar and a splash of gin and maybe some ginger. And some maybe fennel seeds or juniper berries, and you puree that up and then cover the fish with it and then wrap it in foil and leave it for a day. It cures the fish like a gravlax, but it puts this beautiful red layer around the outside of the fish that makes it beautiful on latkes or pancakes, or you know, just eaten as you'd eat a sashimi. So and that, adding that sort of sweet taste would also make it beautiful with your
I'd almost say beets. I'd almost do something like a carriage house, like a cooler vintage carriage house.
Like an 11.
Yeah, like a 10 or 11.
what are the grapes in that?
That's the Cab Merlot, Cab Franc.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that would be lovely. I just wanted to, I don't know, because I know you said videos don't work, but I did stumble across this. Can I just test it and just say stop if it doesn't work?
Sure. And you guys, if it's really, because videos tend to have a lot of lag, so if it doesn't work, tell us in the chat. Those are massive. So Sally, are they still fishing with COVID? Because it seems like there's a lot of people on the boats in close proximity.
Did it work?
It seems like there's a lot of people in close proximity on the boats. Are they still fishing with COVID?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I can't answer that. Well, I know the prawn fisheries are going out, but I don't know if the toothfish ones are, because the prawn fisheries have just come back into season, but I guess they have to put certain practices into place. Oh, that's a good question. I'll find out. Do you want me to keep playing?
Sure.
No. Anyway, I just thought that was a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Sorry, it gives you a.
Those prawns are ginormous. They're massive.
Yeah, they're bigger than your hand sometimes. They're really quite. They're Australia's largest tiger prawns, so they're really quite amazing. And you know, prawns are something that I think are also wonderful to play with for wine pairing, because you can do so much with them by adding different flavors. And you know, it's harder with the farm prawns because often they're kind of farmed in very neutral environment, and so they don't have as much punchy flavor as the wild prawns, like the Gulf prawns that you can get. And you know, I love a red, you know, like a something happened to my screen then. Is it okay?
Oh, I kicked you off. I wanted to.
Yes, the power.
I do. So we'll go back to the game. How would you make prawns, and then what would we pair with it?
Okay, so let's say if we did prawns in a buttery pasta with basil and peas, that for me that would be a perfect pairing for your Chardonnay.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? Any other wines that you're interested in how Sally would pair them? Because we have done a lot of whites, which makes sense.
Yeah, throw me a wine and I'll throw you a dish.
Syrah.
Syrah. Ah, well, I would probably, because I actually love cooking with berries. I might do a like a blackberry and balsamic vinegar glaze, maybe with a bit of honey in it, to like saute the prunes and then toss them with that and serve them over, I don't know, like a orzo or something like that. Something, you know, really soft and buttery and gorgeous. I think that would go nicely with Syrah.
All right. What about Malbec? Becky wants to know.
The Malbec, we probably need some punch there. I think maybe some chili and tomato, maybe some polenta. Sitting on a bed of polenta, and then, yeah, although also that I think that a Malbec could be nice with a really cheesy pesto. Do you think?
Just for that over.
Yeah, A lot of Malbec and beef was my Argentine experience, but it's a much more versatile wine than I probably ate it with down there.
Yeah. But I also, one of my favorite wine pairing foods, because it tends to go with so many things, is getting a pork loin and giving it a crust of allspice, honey, soy sauce, and maybe just a touch of lime juice, and marinating it in that, and then sauteing it and serving it over fennel and cilantro and that kind of light salad. And I have had that with everything from Cabernet to a straight Sauvignon Blanc, and everything seems to work. I don't know which elements it is, but it's one of those sort of easy pairing dishes.
Excellent. So Semillon.
Semillon. Look, I actually just pour a bit of that into an oyster shell and slurp it.
Okay. Tempranillo.
No, I don't know why my head instantly jumped to something with a smoked fish for that. Like maybe, gosh. But that's I would do smoked fish, pasta. No, you're challenging me now. It's coming. I can feel it on the tip of my tongue. But I think smoked fish, maybe with a bit of cooked leek and some kind of pasta. Help me out here, someone. Maybe put a bit of. Actually, you know what? That would make a really good red wine risotto with some smoked fish on it. Actually use it. You know how sometimes when you make risotto, or for me always, the first cup of liquid that goes in is always some kind of wine. If I'm doing seafood on it or something fresh and vibrant, I'll make the first glass that you put in sparkling wine. But if you want to do a red wine risotto, it's really beautiful with some like shaved Parmesan over the top of it, or just a nice sliced cheese. And that would be great with a temperillo.
All right. So we have a question then about what is barramundi and where does it come from?
Well, native barramundi, or wild native, is from the northern areas of Australia and up under Papua New Guinea and the lower Asian continents. These days, it's very hard to find a wild. It's not endangered, but I guess the wild one is so hard to catch and expensive. But if you ever see a barramundi where it's a beautiful, thick fillet and very white, that will be a wild barramundi. And if you can get some of it, it's absolutely gorgeous. But most often now, the barramundi that you see in, say, Whole Foods or markets, it will be made by Australis, which is actually an American company, and that's farmed in the Philippines and Vietnam. So it's farmed very sustainably, and they do really good practices. So it's a lovely fish. It's one that I tend to always have in the freezer because you can have it raw, you can have it as ceviche, and it sautés and poaches up beautiful. It's very, very great to cook with and very versatile in what kind of flavors you can put with it and what wines you can pair with it. But most often now, very rarely would you get the Australian barramundi here in the States. But if you ever see it, you must nab it because it's absolutely gorgeous.
That's true.
Do we have any other?
It's like we missed a question from Scott and Robin earlier about verjuice and we don't see it very often here in the U.S. Mostly because it's the vinegar that you get from the underripe grapes. So if we were fruit thinning, like we're gonna start dropping green thinning, dropping clusters now. And so if you take those and you turn they make vinegar out of them, but because they're still really, really, really hard, it beats your press up. So we don't do that very often here in the States. Is that an Australian thing? Do they do that much in Australia?
Oh, it's very popular in Australia. Yeah, it's quite, not as big as it would be in Europe, but yeah, it's you see verjus everywhere. We use it quite a lot.
Huh. Can you find it here?
Yeah.
From Australia?
I Yeah, I'd have a hard time finding it here. I don't really know why. I guess got enough other vinegars. To me, it's that beautiful sort of, it's like a soft vinegar is how I like to describe it. It's, you know, it forms its own purpose, but you can use it in a lot more things because it's not quite so punchy. So you can use it as a broth or, you know, so many as you would use in a salad dressing as well. You can use it as the salad dressing, just pure verjus. It's really nice that way.
Excellent.
Very much so. Yeah, and by the way, our Australian beef and lamb is really good too. Always grass fed, so to look out for in New Zealand. So, but you have some pretty amazing lamb up here as well, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and we get our lamb from like 4-H kids and people who, there's a lot of people who raise animals here. So that tends to be the nice thing about the Yakima Valley is you get to know your farmers and you can go direct to the source, which, as with everywhere, is definitely the best way to know about the quality of your food.
Yeah, nothing like having that relationship. I mean, your asparagus is quite amazing. And I mean, what wine do you? Because asparagus is one of those foods that's classically hard for wine pairing.
You know, it depends on how you cook it. Because I think if you take asparagus and you grill it, then it cooks down a lot of those sulfur-containing compounds that are very hard to pair. Because what happens with food and wine pairing is like flavors will amplify each other. So if you put Sauvignon Blanc, which has a lot of pyrazines, and asparagus, which has a lot of the same things, it really becomes too much. But if you put them on the grill, those kind of things get diminished. And I think asparagus is easy.
Yeah, during asparagus season, we eat asparagus every night.
Like and sometimes with eggs for breakfast.
Yeah,
so pairs with Riesling and coffee.
we drink all kinds of wines with it. You know, it's
and does it also? I mean, it depends what you put with it too. I mean, it's like if you put, because one of my favorite things to do on asparagus is a bit of goat cheese and hazelnuts, and then, you know, what doesn't it go with when you've got those on it? So.
But you can even put it with pasta. With how did I make that? It was so good. It was a what's it? Oda Lengi has a fabulous asparagus for the pasta recipe. It's almost like a puttanesca with asparagus. So it's got anchovies and asparagus and anchovies. What's not to like about that? And I don't even remember what else, but it was delicious. I mean, that was like a slurp your plate recipe.
Well, it's funny that people, you know, I think artichoke and asparagus are two of those things that people say you just can't pair wine with those things. And I'm thinking, no, you just put other things with them. You know?
Yeah, we do it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I think we had a Chardonnay that night. It was fabulous. It worked great.
Well, and to Tony's point, in Germany, the white asparagus, when I was there last year, white asparagus was in season. And you're going to tell me the Germans are not going to drink Riesling because they're eating asparagus? Like, no. Doesn't make sense at all. So
why would you eat that food if you couldn't pair it with wine, for God's sakes?
Exactly.
You have to cast it out.
That is that's why my sommelier friend Eric has come up with the hashtag, there's a Riesling for everything.
I love it. Actually, when I was talking about smoked, I forgot that I was going to tell you it's really easy to smoke fish in your own home. You don't have to have a fancy smoker. You just got to have open windows. But if you just get a wok or a deep pan and line it with foil, I like to put some, say, jasmine rice or some kind of, you know, flavor some rice down, mix it with a bit of brown sugar, maybe some tea leaves, whatever you like, Lapsang souchong or Sam, or even Earl Grey if you want those flavors, peppercorns, allspice, that kind of thing, and make a nice little mix that's your own kind of flavors. And then you put a bamboo steamer or even a metal steamer, and then you put the lid on and you heat it up until you can feel the pan getting hot, and just lift the lid a bit until you can see a little smoke coming out. You put the fish on it, put the lid on, put a wet tea towel over the whole thing that keeps the smoke in. And depending on what kind of fish, if you were doing like a piece of salmon about that big, or a piece of halibut, 5, 6, 7 minutes would be all it takes. If you're doing a really thick piece of toothfish, you'd need a bit longer. But then you just take it off the heat and then wait for the heat to die down and the smoke to die down. You can even do oysters and just do it for like a minute or two just to give them a little smoky undertone. And then you take the lid off, and I got to tell you that pairing wine with fish when you've done it that way is so much fun. You play with your tea and your wine combinations, or get the notes that are in your wine and use a bit of those elements in the smoke mix, and it's so much fun. It's really, really great. And then you sort of flake it up and put it on toast, or even put it whole on whatever you're making. So it's one of my little secrets. Not a secret anymore, obviously.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the shameless plug question, because now that everybody's hungry and thinking about different ways to cook things, of all of the cookbooks, which I assume are like on Amazon or whatever, is there a good starter, like, is there a fish cookbook or something that you would recommend for people who want to know more about how to cook all these delicious things?
You mean one of my cookbooks?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, yeah, that's easy because they're so, the best one, I think, that I've written, and it won an international award, so hopefully that means it's okay, is Fresh and Healthy. And it's really easy recipes. I've got recipes for, appetizers right through desserts, meat and everything. And it's healthy, but it's the kind of healthy food that I like to create that you don't know it's healthy. You know what I mean? It's just kind of a side issue that it happens also to be healthy. The only thing I would say, because I wrote it when I was working for the Victor Chang Cardiac Research Institute, and they took a lot of the salt out that I had in the dish. So you might want to add a little more salt back into the dishes when you cook it. Because unless you've got high blood pressure, I don't think a little bit of salt is an issue, but they were quite, strict about that one. So, you can get it nowadays for $2 or $3. I mean, it used to be $30 in the bookstores, but now because it's not in bookstores anymore, you can get, copies for $2 or $3 that have just been sitting in library shelves or whatever. So they're still in good condition. So I would go for that. And there's another one that you can still get called Escape to Yountville, and that features my recipes with all the chefs that were in Yountville in the Napa Valley back in 2002. So a whole different scene now. But that'll give you a nice cross-reference of a whole lot of different chefs' dishes, as well as, I tell their stories. And so, those are two that I'd recommend looking out for.
Excellent. Well, and I'm glad you all like this food and wine pairing game, because next week we have my friend Dave, and for any of you on Instagram, this man has more food photos on Instagram than anybody I have ever seen. He cannot possibly eat all the things that he eats and drinks with Dave, because but he's also had a television show. He writes a lot. He came out through DeBrule Vineyard on a media tour last year, I think. And when he found out about Happy Hour, he's like, I want to come. When can I come? I want to talk about barbecue. So next week we have Kansas City barbecue. And he's...
I forgot to show you this, sorry.
So
this is a picture of how if you want to buy the Hero Master Kingfish online, that's how it'll come to you. So it's vacuum packed.
Oh, cool.
And that's what it looks like. So you can sort of see the flesh through there.
That's really good.
Anyway, sorry, go on. Sorry.
That's way bigger than the fish we caught last week.
Well, not mine. And the one that got away.
Of course.
Yeah, the Yakima Canyon is a blue ribbon trout stream, so it is one of the best places to fish for trout in the country. And so we got a boat and a guide and went out last week and took our half a day of vacation, and it was super fun. So when you guys can travel again and come out here,
highly recommend.
It's highly recommended. It was a blast.
Because you have to give all the salmon back to the river. I mean, all the trout back to the river.
You have to give them back.
And have some of the best food that you can get in the country at the grill.
Yes, those gorgeous prawns, they were at the grill. So we didn't even have to catch dinner. It was brilliant.
Yeah, we did catch it, but we were sustainable. We put it back, and then we went up to the grill and we had those beautiful prawns before we had food.
Yeah.
Which we had more fish.
Tony does ask, what's the website for ordering the fish online?
Go to kaigourmet.com.
Is that gourmet spelled the American way or the Australian way?
American, Gourmet. How do we spell it? We spell it like that too, don't we?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's not like center or.
That's a Canadian spelling, because Tony's in Canada.
Okay, good. I'm glad there were. I noticed myself earlier today switching back and forth between American and Australian and and Kiwi, and I was like, oh yeah, sweet as. I said that to myself earlier today, which I haven't used recently. I'm like, I am ready to go to the South Pacific in my head.
I do it too. Yesterday I kept saying everything was lovely, lovely food, and I said, we don't say that here. I kept getting told, you don't say lovely food or lovely dishes here. It's like heaps, oh, I've had heaps.
Well, I'm glad you were all having heaps of fun with, which is my favorite Australian word, with happy hour. And so, I don't know, unless you guys have more food and wine pairings that you want to play the game with Sally all night long, we will probably see you next week.
Well, it's been fun. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thank you so much, Sally.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Happy cooking and pairing, and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.